Welcome to Porch Play Chat, sponsored by the American Association for Promoting the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately named IPA-USA. IPA-USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association. As part of our efforts to promote play, we're happy to introduce our Porch Play Chats, and these are conversations that focus on a wide range of topics from experts that are just as passionate about play as we are. You can find the latest Porch Play Chats on our website and Facebook page. You go to IPAUSA.org, and up in that top right-hand corner is our Facebook page link, our YouTube channel link, and our Instagram link. One Porch Play Chat is released every Monday. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm the president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch is Lisa Murphy. Hey, Lisa.
Nice to see you. I'm on the real porch today.
She's on the real porch. Woo!
I took a Claritin, so we should be okay.
And Mike has 2 inches of snow and it's raining, so he's not on a porch. But we're so happy that
I'm watching my porch, though. I'm just
There
on the
you
other
go.
side.
That
of it.
he's watching his porch. And so we're so glad that Mike has joined us. Mike is a regular on Porch
Yeah.
Play Chats because he has so much to share. So Mike is the co-host of the podcast Teaching with the Body in Mind and the author of the book Embracing Rough and Tumble Play. And he's really dedicated his life to serving children and families and the profession. And he's an amazing author because he's also done 6 picture books for young children. And so today Mike's topic is going to be the inherent flaw in assessment tools and early learning standards. And I cannot wait. What are you talking about, Mike?
Well, I have to say, when I was thinking about this, because I coach teachers, and we have to use an assessment tool, and I watch how that assessment tool affects their behavior. And so last month, because we're gearing up for conferences in a few weeks, and so teachers are like frantically trying to make sure they've filled out these things. And one teacher, when we were coming up with their coaching goal, they decided what their coaching goal was. They wanted to cuddle more with children. And she said she was realizing that she is so focused on trying to get all these things done. And in her head, she has the list. Okay, I'm talking to this child, but what I'm actually doing is going through the list in my head. Did the child just say that? Did they use a prepositional phrase? Did they, whatever, they're like not actually having the conversation. They're evaluating the child. And I thought that was great, and said, yeah, that more teachers need to have these as the goals. And, I was thinking about the inherent flaw essentially is no matter what you do, there's a list, right? Here's the list of standards. Here's the list of things we're going to assess this child on. And we want to make sure we're including the whole child. So we're going to have a lot of things. And all of that's great. But I keep thinking of Ani DeFranco, the singer, has a line that every tool is a weapon if you hold it right. And that's what I think assessment tools
Hold on.
are.
Let that sink in for a second.
I got to write that down. Hold on.
I'm writing it down for us. Okay.
Oh my God. I mean, that is powerful right there. I didn't even know that one. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that.
And I think because I don't want to lose sight of the fact that there are times when assessment tools are helpful, or that standards are helpful, right? Like in talking to a parent about, yes, we are getting these children ready for school, right? So, and here's the state standards. Here's what the state is saying we're supposed to be doing. They are supposed to be playing. They are supposed to be doing this, and when they have conversations with their teachers, this is how, and they, have the alignment to kindergarten standards. So that's a good use of it. I've used it that way this week already. It's also great when a child is not typically developing and teachers are wondering, is there something more that this child needs to help them feel successful in their social interactions, in their physical development, whatever. So there are times when we do need to use these tools. And also I'd say to make sure that we are serving all children equitably, right? That when a teacher and the children are of different cultures, it's a lot harder to make those connections. And if there's a multitude of cultures, unfortunately, we found that the minority cultures are the ones that kind of suffer from whatever lack of positive school experiences or positive learning experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things are great uses. But going back to the flaw part, having a list doesn't tell you which things are the most important,
Mm-hmm.
right? And every single assessment tool, all the state standards, they always have an introduction that tries to explain that.
Yeah.
But the truth is that when you hand a teacher who's trying to do a million things a list
Mm-hmm.
and say, oh, but really focus on play, focus on just your interactions with the child, make sure they're positive, mostly focus on speaking and listening skills, mostly focus on emotions. But here's the list that you have to fill out.
Mm-hmm.
And the emotions is one item, one thing. And then there's like 12 math things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now that okay, well, wait, did I do this? Did I, what about patterning? What about geometry? What about all these things? And that emotions thing that's supposed to be the thing that you do constantly with the child becomes one of the check. I already measured that. I already checked that off the box. I don't have time to deal with their emotions right now.
Feelings.
Yeah, I already did feelings. I don't care that you're sad about your bracelet. You're going to make a pattern on that bracelet.
Right? Yesterday was feelings. Today's math.
Right. And so, I mean, that's all I mean with it really is it doesn't show teachers what they do every day. And inherently, most teachers have that gut feeling and feel bad, right? That they're like, they get torn. Either they're like, oh, I must be wrong about those things, and I'm just going to focus on this list. Or they do the list and feel bad because they know they're supposed to be doing that. Or they skip the list altogether and risk, being in trouble that way, right? So, so that's my basic problem with them. And I feel like, if I can get political here,
please.
I feel like the reason we did that, I think, 15 years ago? I don't know. I've
No
lost track
Child
of
Left
time.
Behind. No Child Left Behind.
Yeah.
No Child Left Behind. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So 20 years ago.
20-ish.
But so basically
early
we
2000s,
made
20 years ago.
Okay, yeah. So we made the gamble that if we are more accountable, quote unquote, more money will go into early childhood. Right.
When did that happen?
Yeah.
Instead, well, actually, more money did go in. Technically, more money went into creating systems to have this, have these standards, have these. So, from a legislator's point of view, we just put in an extra $30 million in the state budget. Never mind that it went to developing a system to go around and rate programs for how well they're rating their kids. And none of it went to having lower ratios, having services for children who need special needs, have different special needs, all of that. None of that got increased. If anything, money decreased in that to afford a system that keeps track of where children are at. And it's like, it'd be like someone coming in sick to the doctor and just simply, okay, well, let's do a test. Okay, come back in 6 months and we'll do another test. And be like, so what are we doing in between? Well, nothing. I mean, we don't have enough money to help you. We're just going to keep testing you. And that's where I feel like we're at with it.
So Mike,
and I know I'm not speaking to...
I mean, really, yeah, you are speaking to the choir, but I think you've really put it into a nutshell. I mean, we know this stuff, right? But, I believe the pressure on the profession is to act like professionals. And so that means you have to assess children and you have to be accountable, right? And so I don't know how we can push back. So this is a conversation, right? So how do we say, what's the most important thing? How do we get directors and leaders in the field to say, yes, we need to do assessment to make sure children are on track, to get them early intervention when needed, to demonstrate to parents that they are growing developmentally, that
Mhm.
the play-based learning that we're doing works, so there's that piece, right? But then you
Mhm.
have the piece where, well, the QRS system says you have to report assessment results 3 times a year so that they can say, yes, we are doing what we need to be doing. Children are growing and developing, so we can get
Right.
more funding. It's this
Yeah.
nightmare
Mhm.
of circular damage, I think, because what you said with the
Right.
teacher's goal was to cuddle more. And if she's not cuddling because she's assessing, then she's not reaching her own goal. So what do we do?
Right. Right. Yeah.
What do we do about this?
I know. And
Well,
of course, if it was a simple answer, if I could put that in a nutshell, then we'd do it. But I have ideas. What are you guys? What's your idea, Lisa? Or what?
well, I
Go.
think there was a
I want to
time
hear you.
when we were more developmentally focused, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, I remember when I first started
Mhm.
teaching, and parents of the 3-year-olds wanted a piece of paper. They wanted something that said my kid's okay. And so, I
Right.
scrounged through the library and I found this absolutely ancient, it was like an images, like line drawn. I
Mhm.
can I can put on my shoes. I can zip my coat. I can sit with friends. And it was under all 4 domains, right? All 4
Mhm.
developmental domains were represented by these little images. And it said, I'm trying, I'm still working on it, right?
Mhm.
And so at the end of the day, like, I wasn't selling my soul. I wasn't compromising, my commitment to play and DAP, developmentally appropriate practice,
Right.
but I was kind of honoring what the parental requests were. And
Mhm.
then I
Mhm.
think we just drifted. We just lost our spot and we drifted so far
Right.
away. We became amazingly inconsistent. And I think there are so many people who like wake up and go, oh my gosh, what happened? I drifted so far. How do I get back? I think there's pressure and coming from all sides. You have to implement a curriculum that is evidence based. It has to be aligned with an assessment package. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can gather all of this data watching children play. How many freaking times do I have to say that?
Mhm.
So it's not that we're not
Right.
wanting to
No.
show any kind of accountability. It's that
Yeah.
the methodology in which you're expecting us to gather this data is so far removed from being developmentally appropriate. That's
Mhm.
ultimately what we're pushing back against. And I think sometimes that gets
Right.
taken out of context. Nobody in the play camp is saying that there isn't room occasionally to do some kind of an assessment here. But
Right.
and Deb, as my professor, taught me this. The minute you're gathering data and you have no idea what you're going to be doing with it, you are bordering
Mhm.
on an ethical issue.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
that conversation all
And
the time. What are you doing with that data?
yeah.
And they go,
Right.
well, there's so much data, and then you're collecting too much of it. So
Yep.
what if you can't do anything with it?
Or if
Then
you don't know or you don't know, well, I just upload it. I upload it. Well, what is that person doing
Right.
with it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I think Lisa makes
Yeah.
a good
And I
point in
think
saying it's not something that we're against, right? Because
right.
assessment is part of, how in the world are you going to develop an activity for a child and scaffold them if you haven't figured out where they are developmentally, right? So I don't have any
Right.
problem with assessment, but when we look at what's happened in the primary grades where they're testing children all the time and teachers have no autonomy, I don't want us to
Right.
become those poor teachers who,
Yeah.
I work with in
Yeah.
graduate programs who say, oh my God, I can't do
Right.
any of these things you're teaching me because I'm too busy doing what I have to do. I have to put the objective on the
Right.
board every day, and we have to be on math page
Yeah.
44. And every first grade classroom has to be on math page 44. And I'm like, this is just crazy.
Yeah, that's
Right.
Crazy.
And ultimately, we've learned from the pandemic that, this whole idea of kids falling behind, it's
Mhm.
like falling behind from what? It's
yeah.
falling behind from the things we decided they should do.
Mm-hmm.
And what we learned was, oh, actually, it's social interaction and it's physical play that are the things missing.
Mm-hmm.
Because if people who thought we just have these standards and then we make kids do it, then this should be the year that kids actually excel because all they did was sit in front of their computer and work.
That's
If
a
we were
really
just
good
a
point.
brain,
Mm-hmm.
this would be the time that those people proved that they were right.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, what they've proved is that the play side of things has been right all along, that people from 100 years ago were right all along, right? And that we are just, we've come so far to, we figured out how to look at little individual pieces of knowledge or pieces of, and how the brain would do this and all that, and losing the sight of, yeah, and it always happens in a social context.
Oh, Mike,
Always.
already
And
again,
even,
you've blown my mind
With
because now
additional pedals.
yeah, well, but now we need an article, right? We have to push,
Right.
this is a New York Times. We don't need to catch kids up because what you were doing all year didn't work. So here's what we need to do instead,
Right.
right? We don't
Yeah,
need
yeah.
to, all these children have fallen behind. They've lost a year of school. No, they've lost a year of socialization and being able to play with friends.
Yep.
And so that's
Mhm.
what we need to be focusing on. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So my head just exploded. It's like, you know that, right?
Thank
But
God
you're
you got that virtual background so we didn't have to watch it explode.
Yeah.
right. Exactly right. Because what we have to do is say if what you thought would work worked.
Right. We actually
Well,
got to have an experiment.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like that. And that's it's off topic, but not really. But it's making me think about back in the mid 90s when everybody started taking recess away, right? That recess time doesn't increase test scores, so we're going to remove recess. And a year later, test scores went through the basement, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you would think, I mean, good data, good research would mean that if you only changed one variable and you didn't get the result, then you reinstate that variable and go after something else. This is
Right.
exactly what is happening again. Oh, that's a
Yeah.
really good point, Mike.
So the article is what we learned from COVID.
Yeah. There we go.
So we need to write that.
That's a
Okay.
book.
Like
That's a
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to write that like right now because they're talking about summer school to catch these kids up, and we're
Right,
talking
right.
about bringing in volunteers to tutor them, and we're talking about doing all this stuff
Yeah.
that is harmful
Right.
to
Right.
kids who have been through a traumatic experience and not having any socialization.
When really
Yeah.
we just need to be opening up the doors and letting them run through the forests and the fields and their playgrounds and their backyards and vacant lots and whatever they have
Right.
access to, where there's a peer group of some sort and
Yeah.
opportunity to move
Yeah.
their bodies.
And I think, like even it's a whole like bastardization of Vygotsky, right? That Vygotsky's whole point was learning happens in a social context.
Mhm.
And instead what we've done is taken, so there's this zone of proximal development. And if we just have this assessment that shows where a child's at, we'll get to that next thing. And the people he was looking at weren't people who knew about those individual things. They were people who just interacted with someone socially.
Mhm.
And therefore you intuitively know, I'm speaking over their head. I have to bring it down a little bit. Or, they're getting bored. I go up a little bit, right? Like when you interact, you do those things. And instead what we did was we tried to make it this like, let's give a score to it, and let's use nice words about it. Even, not quite, not ready, whatever. It just, so my one answer, I was thinking about this as we were talking.
Oh, good.
Because part of the problem is the teacher shouldn't be the one assessing, right?
That
We already know what practices lead to good outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And that spending the money we spent on forcing teachers to do these assessments with not enough training, frankly, too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm a coach, so I'm going to be, but having coaches who can go into programs, watch a teacher, give sort of and so not thinking of it as much like the way a licensor goes in and tells you what you're doing wrong, but a coach is telling you, you did this really well. Here's some things you might want to add to what your practice or whatever. And even they could like, and this child here, we might want to look for we might need that child to be screened for something or whatever, like having some sort of system if we were going to have like that accountability, like to me, that's one way of doing it. Or doing like, I'm sorry, my,
It's early. We
yeah,
understand it's early.
The idea of having like once in a while testing something just to say, oh yeah, this county is actually doing really well. Like we just spot checked a few things. Yeah, these kids are developing, whatever. Like something that's not as intrusive too. I mean, I personally think that's could be a bit intrusive too, but just thinking the idea of testing every single child in 50 different ways or 30 different ways all the time is, and taking away from the interactions that we know are the things that will actually, every single teacher right now, if they could have scrapped their lesson plans and just had fun with the kids, even if it was virtual, I think the kids would be doing, students would be doing much better.
Yes,
right?
trust me. I watched my grandson. So I have 2 grandchildren that live near, and one is in the 4th grade and one was just entering kindergarten. Well, both parents work full-time at home, and then COVID came. So each child was on a different virtual schedule. They would have 30-minute blocks, and then they'd have to log, and they had to log off and then log back in, right? It was crazy. And so I said, okay, we'll take Rory. And so we took Rory. I went and got him on Sunday night, and we took him back Tuesday afternoon, because then I couldn't do any more days, but that at least gave him 2 days with one child instead of 5 days with 2. And I will tell you, he was bored stiff. And so in between each of those little blocks, I'd say, go play. And he'd go and play and play and play. And then he'd come back and be able to focus for a little bit. But I'm not sure there was much learning happening because there was so much technology. I mean, the teacher didn't even sing with them. She put a YouTube video on.
Right.
And it was like, OMG, OMG, OMG. This is not the kindergarten experience you want a child to have. And so, again, I think you've hit on a really important thing, because and so I'm just going to go back to when I was teaching, because we had assessment when I was teaching. It wasn't the crazy stuff right now. Every 3 times a year, children drew a picture of themselves, drew a picture of their family, and I took a language sample 3 times a year. And that went into a portfolio so that at parent-teacher conferences, I could say, here was their language and vocabulary. In the beginning of the year, here was their language and vocabulary. In the middle of the year, here's their language and vocabulary at the end of the year, and show progress every time. I could show their fine motor skills developing. They could, that was pretty much, I think I did one more thing that everybody did, not in a large group, of course, but I would just pull it out and say, my activity today is for you to do this. Come play with me when you're ready, right, during center time. And that showed progress over time, showed fine motor skills, showed language skills, showed social skills, because in the language sample, right, showed fine motor and gross motor skills because I did something outside. I can't remember what it was. And that was my assessment 3 times a year.
Yeah.
I didn't need to do this checklist, right?
Right.
So, I think also the whole thing about testing every child, we know researchers don't do that.
Right. Right.
They take a sample
Yep.
of a classroom and they get their
Sample,
data.
that's the word I was looking for earlier. Sample.
They just take a sample. And so why do we not think
we're
that's
not
a good strategy?
We're not acknowledging the elephant in the room, which is the money piece. If somebody's giving you money, there's no free lunch.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
And I got nothing other than that. I mean, you guys know that. I mean, it comes back to to the money piece and the piece of that breaks our heart, right? If our district is aligned with this particular program, then we have to be aligned with this particular assessment tool, and we got to keep pumping in the data so that we keep getting our funding. And it's just, it's ridiculous because and you've both heard me say this before, and perhaps some of the viewers have as well, but you know, we're standardizing the passion and the caring and the connecting right out of our profession. And we've said that for years. And Heather Santee and that early childhood nerd, and I love the quote that she says about you can't have individualization and standardization. You got to pick which one you believe in. You can't have both.
Yeah, they're not widgets, right? We can't standardize the factory
line.
line.
Off the street can sit down in front of a group of kindergarten kids with a scripted curriculum and read it. Anybody can do that. We are standardizing the passion and the caring and the commitment and the engagement and the authenticity just right. And I'm not saying that this is somewhat okay for middle schoolers or high schoolers. Like, it's still not okay there. However, to know that that is what's trickling down to 2s and 3s and 4s just seems like,
what are we doing? Yeah,
it's
right.
Yeah, and so I think the title of the next article should be "What Are We Doing?" And who's benefiting, right? Even in the primary grades, think of how much money is going into testing versus reducing class sizes. You know, if they want children to be successful, they need a teacher that doesn't have 35 kids in a room.
Right.
Right. So
who is overly focused on when the next assessment cycle is happening or when the next round of tests are happening. What's that Alfie Kohn quote? Alfie, oh, my heart, Alfie. You don't, what is it? You don't fatten a cow by weighing it.
Oh, there you go. See, look at all these good things that are coming out. Mike, you need to email me the guy who said that quote in the beginning. Every tool is a weapon if you hold it right.
It's a singer.
It's a singer. I would need you to email me that because I'm gonna use that because it's so true. It's so true. So as we think about,
let me hold on. Your question, I'm looking at it. Was what is that inherent flaw?
Yeah.
And I think as everybody's been talking, I think that if I had to answer that question in this context right now here on the porch, I'm recalling what Mimi Shenfield said on our podcast, which is that we've lost our spot, right? The dancing term, right? When you're spinning, when you're turning, you've got a spot on the wall, and if you make your spot, then you don't fall down.
Yeah.
And I think a piece of that inherent flaw is that we, as a early childhood profession, have lost our spot, and so we're getting distracted and we're falling down.
And I think it's because we want to be seen as professionals, but when you're an early childhood professional, it looks much different.
Right.
It really shouldn't.
Yeah. The nursing profession has the same problem of spending time with patients is what makes you a good nurse. But that doesn't seem professional because patriarchy, I guess, that caring is not a professional thing. Is supposed to be removed from emotion and things.
Which you can't do in nursing.
Which you cannot. I don't, no. So, wow. So, okay.
Well, you can, but who wants to be on the receiving end of it?
Yeah, I don't want that nurse. And so, again, Mike, you've opened up a whole can of worms, which I love and we've been unpacking some of them, but there's many more, I think, to unpack. And we should probably focus on strategies that early care and education professionals can use to combat what they're facing, and maybe some practical strategies on how to do it without the checklist, right?
Right.
So, if we could think of a way to do what they have to do at the moment until we can change the system, but we also focus on being the teacher that every child wants,
right?
Then I think that's a whole nother porch play chat. So be thinking on that.
Okay.
July-ish.
All right. Gives me a little time to
to kind of go through the weeds and try to pick out some nuggets, because I do think that we have lost I like Lisa's, we've lost our spot. And that's another article, Lisa.
Well, I have to ask Mim for permission. That was
Okay.
Yeah.
Ask Mimi for, maybe she'd write it with us or something.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
The other piece here too, and file this away maybe for the advocacy and for Porch for the July follow-up, but I'm going to make a note, but I want to throw it out here too, is that if I was in a pre-K classroom and all of a sudden now, boom, all of the standard, not standards, but this like kind of assessment would all of a sudden be required of me. I think one of the advantages, having now kind of cut my teeth and been in the profession for a while, I think I like to think I would say, hey, so here's the deal. Let's focus on this phrase assessment. At the end, what's your end goal? What at the end? And if I show you that I can produce for you stuff that you're looking for, and I'm going about it in a more developmentally appropriate fashion, is there room for us to find that compromise, right? That you're still getting what you're needing.
Yeah.
I'm not selling my soul, and feeling like I'm really coming up against an ethical compromise issue. And I'm wondering if that willingness to not just do what you're told, is that something that grows over time, in your career as an early childhood person?
And I want to get back one more time before we close up, but I want to get back to talking about the individual that comes in that does that assessment, right? Sorry, that was my AOL.
Oh, like a third party person, like somebody's the assessor. It's not me, the teacher.
So the issue that I have with that is they don't know your children.
Yeah.
Right. So the second issue I have with that is back with No Child Left Behind, when they were trying to defund Head Start, they did the national whatever test, and they would take children out of the classroom and with a stranger and go over here. So children, even with a stranger in the room, they don't do what they typically do. But I think the idea of providing strategies for teachers that could easily sit down at the end of the day or write. I had Post-it notes in my apron, and as I was observing children, I would say, oh, Mike just cut on a straight line. I didn't know he could do that. He couldn't do that last week. And I would write a note and put the date on it and stick it over in Mike's file. That it just during the daily observations, which I did every day, right? I was able to gather social stuff, emotional stuff, physical stuff without it interfering, because I wasn't interfering with the children's play.
But let's come back to the dead horse that we keep beating to death, making it more dead, which is the further away we get from a play-based program, the more individual fragmented layers of intervention we think that we need. When if we recalibrate back to I hate saying like pure play or just play or real play. I hate saying that. A play-based program. You walk in at 8:20, you go play, and you get picked up or go home at whatever time, and we played all day. And I can use all of that organic play to give you any kind of observational information that you need, as long, but there's no but. I mean, you can do that.
You can. I did it all the time. And so that may be a strategy that we want to tease out. You don't assess the month before parent-teacher conferences. You should be observing all the time. I mean, how do we extend children's learning if we're not observing them and finding ways to enhance their attention to task with the Play-Doh, and then they get bored with just Play-Doh, you put the popsicle sticks on the table, and they get bored with that, and you put the rolling pins out. And I mean, you do good stuff, right? Because even though everything is right behind them on the shelf, the 3-year-olds haven't figured that out yet. And so there are things we can do.
That's the same reason there's end caps at the grocery store, though. Adults don't figure it out either, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, adults don't have it either.
You walk down the Cheez-It aisle, yet you somehow managed to not pick up the Cheez-Its that you weren't even here for. Now I will take 2 because they're buy one, get one.
That's right. Yeah, they're so good
I
at that
didn't even want
marketing.
one, and now I'm leaving with two.
And I don't need either one of
Yeah.
them. And I love Cheez-Its. So, okay, Mike, we're gonna let me do our thing. Don't go anywhere. Let me do my little closing thing. So,
Thanks again, Mike.
thank
Yeah.
Mike. This was amazing. So, for more information on Porch Play Chats or to join IPA USA, please visit our website at IPAUSA.org. And until next time, thanks for listening and keep on playing. All right, let me stop the recording.